Senate Bill 2 by Assemblymember Gabriel. The clerk will read.
Senate Bill 2 by Senator Weiner and others, an act relating to the state budget, making an appropriation therefore to take effect immediately. Budget bill.
Assemblymember Gabriel, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to present SB 2, a bill that increases funding for legal aid services by $25 million in the current year. These programs serve some of the most vulnerable people in California, including undocumented families, veterans, people with disabilities, homeless youth, seniors, members of the LGBTQ+ community, victims of domestic violence, wage theft, and human trafficking, people facing evictions, military families, and more. This funding also will provide vulnerable Californians the information and resources they need to protect important legal and constitutional rights. That is why the state has invested in these programs for years. They have traditionally enjoyed bipartisan support and are important priorities for the state bar, the Judicial Council, and our judicial branch of government, which help to oversee them. For example, the One California program that will be funded here was established in 2015, prior to the first Trump administration. These are not new programs, and they deserve our support. Colleagues, we know that many of our most vulnerable communities are feeling deeply threatened in this moment, and we must stand with them. I respectfully ask for your aye vote on SB 2.
Thank you, Assemblymember Gabriel. Assemblymember DeMaio, you are recognized.
We just had an opportunity to vote on an amendment that would formalize in law that we will not use taxpayer funds to defend people who have felony records, felony criminals. This is what your weekend has been spent on. This is what the Democrat caucus has been debating and torn apart over. Oh, golly, how do we get around this amendment? What do we do? Well, maybe no action by the Trump administration, no position by my colleagues on this side of the aisle is meant in any way to undermine our rich heritage as a nation of immigrants. How lucky are we that we get the best and brightest wanting to come to our country from around the world? So many want to come here that we actually don't have the capacity to take everyone who wants to come here every year. That's not a partisan issue, that's just reality. I ask you to reconsider your position on this issue or vote no on the bill.
Thank you, Assemblymember DeMaio. Assemblymember Bryan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, and thank you to our colleague from San Diego for his remarks. I always appreciate a good gaslighting on this floor. We didn't actually spend the weekend talking about this amendment at all. We spent the weekend talking about the message. And not the message that we're going to send to the unelected man running our country or his beholden friend. We were thinking about the message we wanted to send to the millions of undocumented families, including trafficking survivors who are terrified that their cries for asylum and refuge will go unanswered. A message to the millions of legal immigrants who are afraid to go outside because their country, their home, their nation has begun to normalize the most dangerous forms of racial profiling, othering, and criminalization. The message we wanted to send to our youth who are afraid to go to school and learn. Students who, in the absence of true safety and security, are being taught that their constitutional rights can be erased and eroded, one illegal executive order at a time. We were thinking about the message we wanted to send to every community across California who's afraid to simply exist. I think today our message is pretty clear. You are not alone. California will not abandon you. This body will not abandon you. You have rights, and we will fight to protect and defend those rights, even when it's hard. And that's a message that's rooted in love, a message rooted in compassion and opportunity. It's a message purer than misinformation, more powerful than divisive rhetoric. It's the California message. And I'm proud to stand on this floor today and deliver that message to all of the Californians who are looking for us to do what's right, to do it when it's hard, to do it when it's polarized, to do it when it's misconstrued, misrepresented, and used to demonize and criminalize whole communities. That is when our work is the most important. That is what we were elected to do. And I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Assemblymember Bonta, you are recognized.
Members, I rise today to speak in support of SBX 1-2. Our vote in support of this bill is essential. It is as essential as the immigrants who fuel this economy in our state and who contribute every single day to our very livelihoods. Immigrants help keep the state running and fund, ultimately, that funding goes to help both documented and undocumented communities. Immigrants as a whole continue to contribute nearly $1 trillion to the California economy each year. Undocumented immigrants alone contribute $8.5 billion in state and local taxes in 2022, a number that would rise actually to $10.3 billion if these taxpayers were granted work authorization. And as health chair, I have to mention, our workforce is entirely dependent in many sectors on our immigrant community. 50% of certified nursing assistants in California's nursing homes are immigrants. 47% of direct care workers are immigrants, including 46% of nursing assistants and 47% of personal care aides who are foreign-born. Our state literally runs on the backs of immigrants. Our healthcare system is entirely dependent on our immigrants, who we cannot afford to not support this bill. This funding is an incredibly small fraction of that $1 trillion contribution. I'm voting for this bill because I support helping the struggling college student who qualifies for a visa, but never knew he qualified nor had the resources to pay for the application. I support the mother escaping violence who turns to legal aid organization for help getting on her feet. And despite what our colleague from Corona said and our colleague from San Diego said, fear-mongering and chaos is how we are operating today in the United States with these executive orders that have come one after the other to teach us as immigrants, as undocumented, that we do not belong. That we are people who need to be in the dark while we contribute every single day to this economy. Every single day to the fabric of our society. Make no mistake, afoot in this United States today is a purpose, an intentional purpose, to keep us in the dark, to keep us in the shadows. And California, for far too long, has stood boldly to ensure that every person who contributes to our economy and our society belongs here in our California. That is the California that I belong to. That is the California that this bill supports, to ensure that our community members have the ability to know that they have the resources to support them. And make no mistake, a letter to the Journal is actually clarifying, qualifying intent language that ensures that we know how to spend that money. Criminal illegals. The last time I checked, it was the position of this federal administration that anyone who is undocumented and entered into this country illegally or by other means is actually an illegal and a criminal. That is the position that we are fighting against. That is the position that we need to make sure that we are resourcing in this very moment. I know my district feels this every single day. I had a mother call me and say, I'm worried about my son going into a government building.
30 seconds. Because
of the draconian immigration policies and the raids that she saw. Teachers in my district want to be able to reassure their children and their families that it's okay to go to school. But in reality, they are scared too. So today, we must rise and we must support this measure.
Thank you, Assemblymember Bonta. Assemblymember Gibson, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of SB X12 by Wiener. On the matter that lies on the hearts of our nation, identity, immigration. From the very foundation of this great country, immigrants have been the architect of progress, the hand that has built our cities, our states, our country, and the minds that ignites our innovation. They are not just a number on a page. They are vibrant threads that woven in the fabric of this society. in this country. Immigrants are not just Latinos, it's those from Nigeria, Filipinos, Chinese, Ethiopia. These are our brothers and our sisters. Immigrants bring with them a dream of aspirations, a spirit that fuels our economy with rich history. They remind us that diversity is our strength in this state, with a different perspective of fostering creativity and resilience in this state of California that we love, that we embrace. In every corner of our state, of our land, you will find the stories of triumphs of our families who have overcome diversity and contribute greatly to this country, to this state that we love, that we call the Golden States. California has always been a beacon of light and hope, and have led in this space to protect our brothers and sisters. Makes no difference the language you speak. Makes no difference who your mama, who your daddy is, your zip code. You belong here. This is home. And we say this without pause or any reservation. Immigrants, workers contribute over $1 trillion to California's economy. Immigrants, they are our brothers and our sisters. They are the people we go to church with, the people we go to school with. They teach our children. They care for our crops and our fields. And when we have the audacity to go to expensive hotels, they're the ones who clean our room after we leave. They're the ones who serve us the food that we eat each and every day. It's mind-boggling to me that we're having a debate on something that is so right. And we're buying into this divisive and division that has poisoned the very fabric of this country. Our democracy is being challenged. And I'm trying to look at every one of you in your eyes, and even those who may vote against it. It is our responsibility. Damn it, we protect the least of these that society have labeled invisible, insignificant, and left for dead. We stand up, and it's our responsibility to do just that, to stand up. They build the lives, leaving their own country, coming to a familiar country, and making it. They're the store owners. They're the people who own car dealerships, even in my community, the bakers. And it's our responsibility to making sure, not any of us, when we go to a hospital, are we asking whether or not those individuals caring for us carry a green card, or are they citizens? No, because they're going to care for you regardless. Regardless if you're a Democrat or Republican. They're going to care for you whether or not you voted for the guy, whatever his name is. They're going to care for you regardless because they care.
30 seconds.
And if we forget, we can't go back, because I'm reminded in my own culture of what happened in 1963 with Emmett Till. I'm reminded and know what happened in 1965 in the Watts riot, Breonna Taylor, and the list goes on and on. So we won't go back. I strongly encourage you to please vote aye.
Thank you, Assemblymember Gibson. Assemblymember Ortega, you are recognized.
Thank you, members. I rise to send a message to my colleagues, a message that my parents have sent to this country. When they came here as undocumented immigrants, with me as a 3-year-old and my brother at 6 months old, they said they wanted to come here in search of the American dream, but not just to reap the benefits, but to contribute, and they did. And it's because of that hard work that I dedicated my life to service and ran for office and stand here every single Monday and Thursday pledging allegiance to the flag, the American flag of the United States, and say justice for all. Members, this bill allocates funds to defend the rights of California residents against the illegal overreach we are seeing in our streets and cities today. Many of you have distributed Know Your Rights materials online, and on little cards to be carried around in our wallets. I had a Know Your Rights workshop this weekend with hundreds of members attending from my community and sharing stories of being terrified of being picked up by ICE, or not being able to come home after work, or they're listening to their children cry, being scared of what's happening to their parents. The message on these materials are just a very few simple things. Say nothing, no digas nada. Talk to a lawyer. Here's a phone number to call and ask for someone. Those phone numbers are for local and state nonprofits who have the experience to help them and whom community members trust. Not government lawyers, but community legal aid organizations. But if we are going to vote no, then we should stop telling people to know their rights, because it won't do them any good. There will be no help on the other end of the line, and that American dream we've all worked so hard for will not be there when they call. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Ortega. Assemblymember Lee, you are recognized.
Thank you, members. Of course, I rise in strong support today of SB 2, but much has been said about the 14th Amendment, and I want to bring some clarity to it. I think today we celebrate Lunar New Year. I'm wearing the garb of my ancestors. And it's an important reminder, especially for those on the other side of the aisle, that the 14th Amendment, birthright citizenship, was made solid because of a Supreme Court case in 1898 by Wong Kim Mark, a San Franciscan of Chinese descent, born in California. Now, the 14th Amendment, and rightly so, our speaker alluded to the great works of Abraham Lincoln, who fought to preserve the Republic, and his work, which outlived him, was to guarantee citizenship to the people who were freed from slavery, which is the basis of the 14th Amendment. So, of course, that alarms many of us on this side of the aisle, that there are people in this room who defend the president to get rid of birthright citizenship, which has been the bedrock of our society, of our immigration system, for over 100 years. And it was a Chinese American who made that very real, because some people wanted to make sure that was denied to people. And yet we're seeing history again repeat itself. And so I get very tired of hearing from people at the federal level or even from this house that pay lip service to legal immigrants. My colleague from Oakland puts it right. This federal administration wants to criminalize the very existence of people. Doesn't matter if you stole something or hurt someone, just you existing. Your legal status is a crime in and of itself, enough to be sent on a plane and put in Guantanamo Bay. That is what they want to do. And I'm not exaggerating here. Go on the White House social media. That's literally what they say themselves. And so I get very tired of hearing about this lip service, because even that executive order would affect your legal constituents and their children. Under that executive order, all visa-holding immigrants, their children would not even be citizens anymore. So if this executive order had happened when I was much younger, I would not have been a citizen. And then I asked my colleagues, what do you do about those illegal kids now? The ones that are born here, born to legal visa holders? Are you also going to put them on a plane and send them away because they were criminals, because they were born too early to take the test? Because that sounds like the vision of a future that certain party is spreading and going back in the past. So I think today it is very important and very salient that our speaker brought up the works of our President Abraham Lincoln, because our country was torn apart before to fight against a white supremacist abusive regime. And now today I see echoes of it again, trying to put people back in their place, getting undesirables out of the country, and that is not hyperbole. And I really hope that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle understand that this legal defense fund is for people that are facing domestic violence, eviction crises, or other things they need help in, and they also happen to be immigrants. Their immigrant status doesn't define them, yet that certain people in the political spectrum want to define them solely by their immigration status and treat them as such. That's not the case. In California, we have people who work in the fields, people who work in offices, and yes, people who also make a bunch of crypto money who are immigrants right now. And without us, our country would not look anything like it. And without our immigrants supporting, especially in my district in Silicon Valley, I don't think that we would all do all the great things that the other side of the aisle want to also fund. So we have to be very careful and talk about this, but I also want to set the record straight that this would affect all immigrants, not just the ones that you make sound scary and do all these crazy things, but also the very legal folks who fought very hard to get through an inhumane immigration system. And so the solution, if my colleagues really want to always fix the immigration problem, is really to make immigration work again in this country. And that's something I think we all want to do, but instead, there's certain people here who focus on the most sensationalist aspects of immigration, instead of actually focusing on the root problem, is that our immigration system is broken in the first place. So let's stand up for our immigrant community, all the issues they face, and this is a small pot of money to make sure that their everyday struggles, they can actually have a voice in court. I ask for your support.
Thank you, Assemblymember Lee. Assemblymember Bauer-Kahan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of SB 2. As many of you know, I was raised by refugees. My grandparents both came to this country as refugees from Nazi Austria. But I'll say my grandmother always wanted to be called a survivor, not a refugee. She said she was strong. She was a survivor. And, you know, as I was thinking about coming today to take this vote, it was their story that was in my heart. In 1939, they knew Kristallnacht was coming. My great-grandmother took them to the opera so they wouldn't be rounded up and taken to their deaths. The only reason my great-grandfather didn't end up at a concentration camp was because they were at the opera. My other great-grandfather did end up in Dachau. Jews were being rounded up and sent to the most horrific death any of us could ever imagine. Gassed in rooms full of people, sent to the crematoriums. And so they sought refuge in this country, and it wasn't easy. As many of you know, boats of Jews were turned away to be sent back and killed by the Nazis. When my grandmother died and I was helping my dad go through her house, my grandmother was very tidy, and I opened a drawer, and it was not tidy. And in it I found stacks of documents in German. My dad came over, who was raised by German speakers, and started to read them. They were the documents from when they were trying to flee, the papers carried across borders that showed that they were the next to go to the death camps, the rejections, the numbers way down the list where they wouldn't survive. So my grandmother and grandfather were sent off before their parents. My grandmother would describe the day she left, saying goodbye to her mother, her father, her beloved dog, and her grandmother, who she would never see again. And she went off to England and hoped and prayed they would make it to this country. And then they did. She described the boat trip from England to New York as the best days of her life. She danced in the hull of the boat with the other folks who knew their lives had been saved by this great nation. As she sailed into New York Harbor, she saw the Statue of Liberty, and as she walked onto Ellis Island, where she would get her first taste of being an American, she realized she had been saved. And it was the people who helped my grandparents get to this country, the organization that supported them in resettlement, that saved their lives, and it's the reason I'm standing here today. And so, as I became a lawyer, immigration practice was an important part of what I believed I needed to do. Because like our colleague from San Leandro, I was taught that this country gave us everything, and we owed everything back. And it isn't an accident that the two of us are standing on this floor as public servants. We were taught we have to serve this country. We have to make it the great nation that was promised to us when we were given the American dream, or even just a chance to live. And that is what immigrants are to this nation. But when, like my family, you're coming to a country with nothing, you need help. It's not simple to seek asylum. You have to figure out how, the elements of the case. And we know that people who have a lawyer who are seeking asylum are granted refuge more often than those who do not, because access to justice involves counsel. It is why I became a lawyer. It is why I'm proud to be a member of the bar. And so, as I have had the privilege of representing people in the immigration system, many of whom don't get asylum, but some who do, who get the chance my family got, I know that we are saving generations of people. And that is what we are doing today, members. We are giving people like me a chance when they come to this country, fearing for their lives, to get a moment in court, a moment of justice, and a second chance at life, and the opportunity to give back and serve this nation and make it stronger. So I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember Bauer-Kahan. Assemblymember El Hawari, you are recognized.
I rise in support of SB 2. As the daughter of immigrants, my mother is from Guatemala, my father from Egypt, and raised by a stepfather who was undocumented from Mexico. the importance of us standing up for our communities, for our families who raised us to give back, who know the importance of ensuring that our communities have the supports that they need. We are doing this because we know we were elected to do something and to do everything we can to support every single one of our community members, especially our immigrant communities who are struggling right now. Permission to read?
Without objection.
One of my community members, in addition to many others, reached out over the last couple weeks since these executive orders. One person read, "Sade, do something. Our community is terrified right now. Lots of people don't know their rights. The anxiety of having our family taken away. They're targeting our schools. They're targeting our children. They're targeting every single one of us. And to say that this is just about criminals is wrong. They are knocking at every single door in our communities, in communities like South Central Los Angeles, where so many of our folks are undocumented. We cannot sit idly by. We must do something. And we did not come to play. We came to do something. And we will do something because that's what our communities deserve. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember El Hawari. Assemblymember Castillo, you are recognized.
Thank you. Members, again, I stand in opposition for SB X1-2. My opposition is not rooted in hostility towards immigrants. I am the daughter of immigrants. I'm a first-generation Mexican-American. My father came to this country through the Bracero program. He lived in Tijuana with my mother while he came across and worked the fields through Central California. My 3 oldest siblings were born in Tijuana. They had their green cards. My dad had his green card. The 3 youngest, we were born here in the United States. This is not about immigrants or this country not wanting immigrants. This is about a process that's done, and it's done legally. My father submitted paperwork for my mother's, all her siblings, and all of them became either had their green card or became U.S. citizens. The youngest ones, he has been a U.S. citizen for about 3 years now. His paperwork, my dad passed away in 1999, and he submitted the paperwork for my mother's 2 youngest siblings before he passed away, and that's how long that process took. So there is a process to it. I come across people every day. I tell them, stop looking over your shoulder. Get an attorney if you need to. There is a process to do this. There is a way to do it. Instead of paying for a car, this and that, pay for an attorney to be able to do it the right way so you can stop looking over your shoulder. That's all I'm saying, and I oppose this.
Thank you, Assemblymember Castillo. Assemblymember Carrillo, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I really got encouraged to speak about my personal story because of my colleague, Bauer Kehan, and my colleague, Ortega. I'm the oldest of 8. In 1985, I saw my father leave his family to come to California. He came here in search of a better future for his family, and later on to achieve the American dream. In 1987, my mom left her kids, to come join my father in California. We were left with grandma. And not until you really leave the experience of seeing your parents leave in search of a better life for their kids, then you realize how much it means to come to reach the American dream. In 1988, she went back and brought me with my 2 little sisters. We left behind the rest of my siblings. In 1989, the rest of my siblings joined us here in California. I'm proud to say that we all reached the American dream. And that's what we immigrants do. We come in search of a better life. We are law-abiding citizens, and we serve our communities. I became a public servant as a city planner, and I did that for about 20 years. I became a public servant, being an elected official for the Palmdale School District, for the city of Palmdale City Council, and here I am today. The American dream is possible. And speaking of the merits of the bill, there are those organizations that do those things for all immigrants, including myself and my family. I remember getting Christmas presents from people that I did not know about. One Christmas, they came knock on my door, and they gave us Christmas presents. And that's the power that these organizations do. They help immigrants become law-abiding citizens. And I just wanted to share that story, again, because I got encouraged by my colleague, Barbara Cahan, and my co-chair of the Latino Caucus, Liz Ortega. We are here to do the hard work. We are here to contribute and continue the fabric of the United States. That's my experience. Sometimes all we need is an opportunity. That opportunity comes with a risk, crossing the border. Imagine you leaving your children. Imagine you leaving your spouse, your significant other, in search of a better life. And that's why we're here in California, in the United States, because this is where dreams come true. And I urge you to vote aye on this, because this is not about me, it's not about my siblings. My father passed away 5 years ago. But it's about the future of the United States of America. It's about the future of California. Think about the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Carrillo. Assemblymember Alvarez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise without prepared remarks in response to our colleagues who have spoken about their personal story, and I want to briefly share mine. My father came to this country undocumented, so did my mother, so did my 5 siblings. They all came to this country without any documentation. And they came here with that American dream in mind. So for me, this issue is about how do we keep the American dream alive for future generations? That dream that my parents worked so hard to accomplish, the legacy that they left for me, and the responsibility that now I feel that I bear on my shoulders. I don't want to stand here and lecture our colleagues who will not support this, but I would like them to open their hearts a little bit to the stories of people like me who have lived in fear. Those of us who come from undocumented families, my parents didn't receive their legal documents until many years after they were here. But as I was growing up as a young boy, the fear of your family being deported and being separated and not knowing what that means for you is very real. And I didn't realize this was something that I had really hid inside me until a couple of weekends ago when my daughter asked me about whether or not she could be deported. And I had to walk her through what I still believe is the Constitution, which is that as a child born in the United States, she does not have to fear for that. And then she asked me about grandparents, her grandparents who are still alive on my wife's side, who are not born in the United States, and what could happen to them. All that just led me to realize that the fears that we instill in young people are very real, and I would like for all of you to just acknowledge that. I don't expect you to support this, but I'd like you to acknowledge that there are people being hurt because of the actions that are being taken. And what this bill is about funding some semblance of protection, some semblance of a safety net for kids who are growing up in that fear, so that they can see themselves as part of accomplishing the legacy that their parents worked so hard for, the sacrifices that they made, like the ones that were made for me. And for my colleague, our colleague from Corona, she raised issues about legal assistance. That's what this is about, so people can pursue a legal process. My dad passed away 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago. But when he turned 85 years old, I still have the United States flag of when he took the oath of office, or the oath, and became a United States citizen. It was one of the most proud moments of my life, and it's certainly the story of my family is written because of an immigrant, my father, who came here to pick crops, to clean offices, who always had a minimum wage job, who could never afford to buy a home in this country, but he left the foundation so that all of his kids could, that we could contribute in this way, and we could live that American dream. So I ask you to support the many others that are out there that through this fund, actually that's how my father received support through Catholic Charities to go through the immigration process, to become a naturalized citizen. That's what this funds. And so I ask you to just think about that, maybe beyond today, because I think you've all probably made up your mind on how you're going to vote. But as we move forward and we try to fix a broken system that both parties are to blame, which is why we're standing here today, because it's been convenient not to fix this over the last 40 years, and maybe we should all step up now to do the right thing and fix this once and for all. I ask you for your aye vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember Alvarez. Assemblymember Avila Farias, you're recognized.
Good afternoon, members. I rise in support of SB 2 that we support this. As a granddaughter of Mexican immigrants, my grandfather, too, also came under the Bracero program. And today, I came very proudly to this chamber to support my community and the state of California. We are all immigrants. Some of us are indigenous and native to the state. And today, we all have an obligation to protect our people, our gente. And it was by choice today that I walked into this chamber with my rebozo, that we all know what this symbolizes. It's guerreras, our revolution, and the women that have come before us to fight for all of us. And if we study our Mexican-American history, we know what this symbolizes. And I urge my colleagues here, no matter what side of the aisle you are, let's look at our history, and let's together work nationally to fix immigration. My grandfather came through the Bracero program, as I said. They shut that down in the 1960s. There has not been a path of immigration for people to come what we call the right way. But yet, we love tacos. We love Mexican culture. We love to go to Mexico and any other Latin country. But when it comes to give an opportunity, we are villainized, criminalized, and we have no future. But today, I stand very proudly with Mr. Speaker and my colleagues to support this and defend this. But most importantly, we see you, California. We see you, United States of America. We are a diverse, rich culture, a nation. Just like my rebozo, woven with silk and wool and full of color. That is what America is. I urge you all to please support this.
Thank you, Assemblymember Avila Farias. Assemblymember Tongipa, you are recognized.
I rise today in complete astonishment in what I've heard. Not once have we stated we were anti-immigrant. I can't be. And I've heard the personal story of so many other members. Last year, on Christmas, I was able to give my mother, as her sponsor, her accepted application for legal residency here in California. What we've simply asked is that we, as a legislative body, ask all of you to follow the laws that we have in this country. We cannot have subjective interpretation. We want to protect all immigrants. We want to protect our family members. But what we have simply asked today to ensure that dollars were not used to protect criminal, illegal immigrants, that was not good enough. You read it into the record today, so you actually don't disagree with us, but it was not good enough to codify it into law, that we were going to make sure that our dollars spent here were to protect immigrants that belong here, or people that belong here. We don't disagree on this. What we disagree on is how this process should go. We cannot have subjectivity to our laws. We cannot protect murderers and rapists, friends and family of mine that I know that are considered angel families, that brothers are not here anymore because they were killed. Not a single one of us is anti-immigrant. Our caucus on this side is a majority of us derived from immigrants that come here. When I was raised by my mother and I stood in the food lines not too far from here, she would always tell me, in Tongan, you may be the poorest Americans, but you're the richest Tongans because you're in America. She raised me to be a law-abiding citizen because it is the greatest privilege in the history of the world to be born and to be an American citizen. She instilled that into me. She fought for this country. She's now a legal resident of this country. She would hope that others take that same pride and demand that we follow laws in this country or we have no country. We simply asked that we didn't protect criminals, and it wasn't good enough. Prop 36 was a mandate to every single one of us in this legislative body and passed in every single county to hold criminals accountable. And I'm shocked to see today that lessons haven't been learned, that criminals were put over Californians, and our Democratic colleagues decided that it wasn't good enough to take action, but it was good enough to read it into the record. It's not good enough for Californians. I rise against this measure because it's incomplete, and we don't do anything to protect those who want to be legal American citizens.
Thank you, Assemblymember Tongipa. Assemblymember Rubio, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I stand before you as a formerly deported undocumented immigrant. Coming to this country, my country now, was life-changing. I came from Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, Mexico, a place that I call the cartel capital of the world. There are stories, in fact, there is a documentary called The Women of Juarez. This story is about hundreds of women that have been kidnapped and are missing. Instead of me being one of those women, I stand before you as the proud representative for the 48th Assembly District at the state capitol. We talk about the right way of doing this. We are told to get in line. Colleagues, there is no line. The immigration system is broken. There is no line. People are treated differently depending on the country they come from. My father and mother speak limited English. We have been citizens for 30 years now, but my father still has fear because of how he looks, and he won't be able to defend himself if he is stopped. This bill is to fund services to get through those lines legally and to protect those that are here legally and will be profiled because of how they look and the type of work that they do. I urge and I vote on SB 2 to provide those services for everyone. I was elected to protect all of Californians. So please, I urge and I vote, and to my gente migrante, estamos con ustedes.
Thank you, Assemblymember Rubio. Assemblymember Soria, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of SB 2. This bill speaks directly to who we are as Californians, as Americans, and as human beings. It calls upon our sense of community, our shared values, and our collective responsibility to one another. This bill will provide essential community-based resources to continue to provide legal support, strengthen worker protections, and increase access to critical service for our hardworking immigrant families. These resources are crucial to alleviating the fear and the anxiety caused by the administration's aggressive immigration actions, which have left many hardworking families on edge, even families like mine. As a daughter of immigrant farm workers who came to this country also undocumented, just like many of the immigrant families in my district and across the state, I cannot sit idly by. I will not stand by and watch the current administration and radicals on the right demonize, criminalize, and target our hardworking immigrant families. This is personal for me. And it's personal for countless of others that live in my district. Also, as a person of faith, I feel a moral imperative to stand up for our immigrant families, to ensure that we do everything in our power to protect the hardworking individuals who continue to make California an economic powerhouse. But if you're not moved by the moral imperative, then listen to our agricultural leaders and the economists who are sounding the alarm. They warn that if these raids continue or escalate, which we know they will, California's agricultural sector will face disruption unlike anything we've seen in decades, resulting in a rise in grocery prices across our country. And let's not forget, these are the very same grocery prices that many of those across the aisle promised to lower during this last election cycle. As the Ag Chair, let me remind you, California is the breadbasket of America. Our fields, orchards, and vineyards feed millions across the country and around the world. But behind every harvest, behind every meal on our tables are the hands of our immigrant laborers. just like my parents, who have spent years, even decades, contributing to our economy, raising families, and strengthening our communities. These individuals are not criminals. They are our neighbors, our co-workers, our relatives, and in many cases, the backbone of industries that keep California working. Without immigrant workers, our food supply chains would collapse. Studies have shown that mass deportations result in labor shortages, abandoned fields, and skyrocketing costs, driving food prices up for every American family. I ask you, who will pick our fruits and vegetables? Who will clean our homes? Who will build the housing units we so desperately need? Who will care for our children? Who will prepare our meals when we show up to our local restaurants? Who will help rebuild Southern California? The administration supposedly said their mass deportation agenda is solely focused on targeting dangerous criminals. But that is not what I'm hearing from my constituents. And it's certainly not what we're seeing in the news. I don't know if you guys have been watching the news or even social media, but immigration agents are terrorizing our communities.
30 seconds.
Documented or not. So I want to make sure that you all know that my vote today is for our immigrant families, not just in my district, but across California that are living in fear. Today, with my vote, I choose to send a message to my 11-year-old cousin that I, along with dozens of California leaders, will do everything in our power so he can focus on his education and not have fear being separated from his hardworking father, my uncle. Today, with my vote, I choose to send a message to Monica from Madera, who's a community leader that dedicates countless hours to ensure our most vulnerable in Madera have food on their table by setting up regular food distribution. So today, colleagues, I ask you to be brave. I ask you to stand up for California, because that is what I'm about to do today, and I urge your strong aye vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember Soria. Seeing and hearing no further debate, Assemblymember Gabriel, would you like to close?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let me start by thanking all of the colleagues that shared their personal stories in such a real and such an authentic way and in such a moving way. And I was struck by how different and yet how similar all of those stories are. And I was looking around this body, I realized that with the exception of our colleague from San Bernardino who chairs our Native American caucus, every single one of us in this room is either an immigrant or a descendant of immigrants. So in a sense, this is our story. This is a California story. And we have a decision to make at this moment in time. And I agree with our colleague from the Central Valley that there are profound moral implications for the decision that we're about to make. But how do we want to approach this? Do we want to approach this from a place of fear, or do we want to approach it from a place of love? And what I'm struck by as I listen to this debate is there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding of what these dollars are going to go for and what these nonprofits do and why we as a state have been funding many of them for more than 25 years. And I want to invite those who are worried about the use of these resources, go spend time in your community with the organizations that are standing up and representing those who've been victimized as victims of domestic violence. One of the first cases that I took as a young attorney was representing a woman whose immigration status was in flux as she sought to seek a temporary restraining order in Los Angeles Superior Court against an abuser that was subjecting her to horrific physical abuse. In many of these cases, people's lives are at stake, and folks whose immigration status is in flux are the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. I think those of you that go and spend time with these organizations, you will feel proud of the work that they do. You will feel proud of the work that they do for undocumented folks. You will feel proud of the work that they do for military families. You will feel proud of the work that they do for homeless veterans. You will feel proud of the work that they do for domestic violence victims. So I would really encourage those who have a reason to oppose this, which I think should be bipartisan, which I think is fundamentally common sense. I'd think about it. I'd pray on it. I'd go spend some time with the people who are doing this work, because this is something that all of us should be behind. And for those who talked about the system and wanting to work within the system, this is the system. These are organizations that are working through the legal process. And I think what I realized is that many of the folks in this room are probably not attorneys, and haven't had the opportunity to appear in immigration court, as I have, haven't had the opportunity to work through the process, whether or not you are represented by counsel is basically the whole ballgame. Someone who goes through that process without the representation of counsel, no matter how just their case, no matter how horrific their circumstances, they don't really stand a fighting chance. And that's because most of this immigration work is not happening in traditional Article III courts, it's happening in Article II courts, where the administration is both the prosecutor and the judge. So I would encourage folks to do more learning about this. I know that we don't do immigration work here in the state legislature. That's something that they do in Washington. But I assure you, as you learn, as you interact with those folks, as you have the opportunity to interact with our undocumented Californians, you cannot help but be moved by them. As some of you know, I had the opportunity before I came to the legislature to sue the first Trump administration when they tried to end the DACA program. And it was the absolute privilege of my life to represent those undocumented Californians. And as many of you know, that case, with the help of many legal services organizations, with the help of the state of California and the UC, went to the United States Supreme Court. And it was Justice Roberts, a conservative justice, appointed by President George W. Bush, who wrote the majority opinion saying that the Trump administration had violated the law in ending the DACA program. So as we think about these two bills and collectively what it's going to mean to fund our Attorney General and to fund these legal services organizations, we should be united in this. This is about the Constitution, it's about the rule of law, it's about the people of the state of California, all of them. I respectfully request your aye vote on SB 2.
Thank you, Assemblymember Gabriel. All debate having ceased, the clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 58, noes 17. The measure passes.